Sunday morning, I joined Chris Bryant's popular YouTube stream for a wide-ranging discussion on all of my favorite topics: pragmatic campaigning, movement factionalism, and AI's impact on animals. Chris generously gave me permission to share the full conversation here. This was a full circle moment for me. When I started Pax Fauna without any research experience to speak of, Chris gave me some helpful advice. I was tickled to hear that my writing has helped him think about AI and even inspired him to drop thousands of dollars on Claude Max plans for his team. I hope you enjoy.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited. Yeah, where all the ground we can cover.
Yeah, absolutely. We read your Sandcastles blog often on the stream, and yeah, it's been very informative and formative, I would say, to my thinking about the role of AI and pragmatism and idealism and all this kind of stuff. I first came across it during the FarmKind saga earlier this year, and I've since read a couple of your posts on AI. But why don't we start off if you want to tell people like a bit about yourself and your background and so on?
Sure, and I'll first just say that's a sort of a full circle moment, because you probably don't even, well, you may or may not even remember this, but you gave us some advice when I was starting Pax Fauna, which was like a little research outfit, and we had no research background, or we're totally unqualified to be doing what we were doing, and you gave us some advice on some of the research.
Oh, awesome. Okay, no, I actually don't remember, but that's really cool. Okay,
yeah,
nice.
I would have expected you to. So yeah, great. My name's Aiden. I kind of got into the movement through Direct Action Everywhere and spent my first many years in the sort of radical grassroots abolitionist wing, which, you know, to some extent, that distinction is one that I'm hoping will collapse and trying to accelerate the collapse of. But at the time, I really believed in it, and I thought of, you know, welfare campaigns and EA as like almost the enemy more than like the industry. I was like, you know, this is really undermining our message. It's gonna sort of, yeah, just ameliorate the public's concerns and make them feel like this is something okay to do and go along with. And I was really resistant to arguments in favor of it. And I think what changed, you know, there was I think more hostility and condescension from both sides of that divide back in those days. And I think I think we both really thought we knew what the right answer was. And that's was I got involved in around 2015. Over the next like 5-6 years, I think all of us were humbled a little bit. I mean, Cage Free did win a lot of things, but then commitments started to look questionable as we tried to expand that toolkit to things besides Cage Free, like Better Chicken Commitment. It kind of was falling flat at first. And then on the grassroots side, you know, we just had these visionary claims about what our activism was going to trigger. And, you know, 5-6 years in, it felt like we'd been doing the same thing for years, and it became clear that it wasn't leading where we said it was going to lead. So I eventually got discouraged and decided to step back from frontline work for a couple of years with a fellow from DXE named Eva Hamer. And we started a group called Pax Fauna, which was a research project basically to try to figure out what was going wrong. In DXE in particular, we kind of found we were running into the same limits to growth every year. Like DXE's theory of change was very focused on mobilization, number of people. And, you know, for a while, it was like, we felt like we'd hit our hockey stick moment, and then it plateaued again much lower than it needed to. So we were trying to figure out why that was happening, and if we could either find a solution to it or eventually started thinking instead, okay, maybe we're not going to get more people than this for animals right now. And at this point in history, how can we be more effective with these numbers? And that was really when I started to turn and look and like say, oh, I think some of these other groups that I had really kind of dismissed for years were actually onto something. And not only, you know, the kind of disciplined focused campaigning that was happening on the welfare side, but also I learned about groups like CAFT, Coalition to Abolish the Fur Trade, which was really kind of having a moment and is still having a moment now, I would say, using that kind of really focused disciplined campaign with a winnable target proportional to the amount of power that we have right now obviously on the fur industry. And they're now in this kind of coalition that's working on things like foie gras as well, along with things like cage free and shrimp isoculation. So I ended up focusing on then political campaigns for a few years, but I've moved to be thinking about some of these broader questions about how we can, you know, I'd say my big focuses right now and on the blog are like dissolving some of these arbitrary distinctions between different factions in the movement that I think have really been holding us back, and then thinking about how the arrival of artificial intelligence is going to affect our strategic environment and what we need to be doing now, what opportunities we might have now that might close really soon. And I wrote a little bit about infighting too, which I think historically has been a big problem for us.
Nice. It's so cool that you've had very varied then history in the movement and like an evolution in your views during that time as well. I've just been speaking to Roger Yates, who's an old school British animal rights activist, and has taken some objections with the more kind of pragmatic approach. So I'm coming from a sort of polar opposite conversation in some ways. But yeah, also, I don't know, I think there's more objectives in common there than apart sometimes. And I guess that it's interesting to hear about your evolution of your views towards things like cage-free and other welfarist measures. Talk a bit about that. What kind of led or informed that kind of shift for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. The interesting question to me is less like what convinced me to accept it, as much as it is what was holding me back from accepting it. Because now I look back and I remember, even pretty recently, even after I kind of softened to there being a role for cage-free campaigns. We'll use cage-free in particular because I think this was like and in some ways continues to be like the most controversial instance of welfare campaigning. And certainly back in my early years, 2015, 16, 17, even as recently as like 2021 or 2022, I remember at a point when I was like, I thought that these welfare groups were doing something really constructive. I remember arguing to my friend James Osden, like, but it's still not really clear that it's actually a welfare improvement. And James was, kind of, he's gone through something like that same journey, although he did it a little faster than me. And he was a little bit horrified that I was saying this. We argued about it. And that was the last time I remember saying this, because I did take that afterwards and just reflect. I think to me now, it's just like, it so obviously is. Like, if you just really picture yourself as a chicken in a farm, and you are spending your entire life, on something smaller than this very tiny porch that I'm standing on with 5 other people shoulder to shoulder, like the enormous relief it would be to be just have the cage open, and now you have run of the barn, and you can move around, and you can, run away from someone if they're being mean to you, pecking you, or whatever, or you can like choose where you sleep. With just that amount of freedom, it's like freedom is not, I wrote about this in one of my kind of letters about this to folks who see this the way that I used to see it. Freedom isn't just like a black and white thing. We all think of ourselves as free, but there are, I have to pay taxes. I have to go through the security check line at the airport. And obviously a chicken in a cage-free farm is far, far, far less free than me, but they're a little bit more free than a chicken in a battery cage farm. And that's just like, to me now, it's like, so the fact that I was arguing against that, it was clearly motivated reasoning. Like, I wanted to dislike cage-free. I had these other objections to it, and I let myself use that to convince me that even the actual basic welfare claim, which I think now is just so obviously true, was not true. And so I'm very suspicious of like the whole pattern of thinking that was leading to me into this for years and years. And it's like humbled me a lot and made me think like, wow, I need to be careful and like not trust myself.
That's a good instinct to have. I feel the more like self-critical you are, there's such an important sort of meta value to drive what you're going to advocate for next, and be looking for the ways that you could be wrong and willing to change your opinion and stuff like that. That's super cool. Then it's like a change from the black and white perspective to the sort of shades of grey on that particular issue. I can definitely see how particularly vegan advocates primarily, like if you spend a lot of time doing the street activism or whatever, like trying to convince people to go vegan, I can definitely see how that experience leads a lot of people to the view that kind of welfare campaigns are counterproductive, because of course in the conversation about diet change everyone says, well, we get the high welfare, we get the free range or whatever, and so have enough of those conversations and you are like coding that as an excuse not to go vegan, and that's kind of the main part of that one sees. But yeah, I do think that there's a meaningful improvement in the welfare. And then the other part of it, which I always talk about as well, is pushing up the cost of farming the animals. There has to be like some sort of more expensive system than there was before, and so there's going to end up being fewer animals farmed overall. But yeah, that's really, I can totally see how people are in the view that like this is somehow a bad thing because it's mainly used as a justification. But I think it's interesting is it depends where you spend, what issues you spend your time thinking about as to how you'll take that.
And that's certainly true. I mean, those were two stops that I did get off at and spend a little time on the train from like where I started to where I am now. And I'm sure, there's more stops to go. But probably the first point for me was the price. That was the first time I heard. I had a very good friend I went to college with, who was like the president of the vegan club when I was in college, and she went on to very big things in the movement, working at welfare campaign organizations, and she was the first person to articulate that price point to me, and I was just like, never thought about that. And it was like the first thing that I was like, yeah, okay, that aligns the theories of change, right? That's a way that this could be a step towards this bigger thing that we want. And it was later the question about there was a point at Pax Fauna when maybe several stops later where I was thinking, okay, like cage-free campaigns, they're productive, they build power, they raise the price, but they're not a good messaging strategy. Like they're not the foot we want to put forward to the public, because they're going to have this kind of effect, and even they aren't that exciting to the public. Like even the public kind of sees through cage-free, which there's definitely a grain of truth to. There are people, if they learn the details about it, they're like, well, that's pretty underwhelming. They're still just in a giant factory farm. But I have moved on that too, and I would now it's just like I don't we could take different lessons from being out on the street doing vegan outreach, and maybe the first lesson you'll take after doing it for a few weeks is, wow, these are the things I keep hearing, and this cage-free thing is like kind of this welfare, the humane lie is really causing me a problem. But I think if you do it for a few years, my guess is most people will be like, people aren't going to go vegan.
Right. Just I think it's a lot of practical barriers, basically, isn't it? And an economic problem ultimately, where you want the alternatives to be more appealing than the animal products, and there are kind of things on both sides of that equation, making the alternatives better and making the animal products less desirable in terms of messaging and stuff like that. So I think there's definitely all sorts of things that can productively be done within that. But yeah, I do get frustrated by sort of anti-welfareists. Yeah, so that's good. There's a lot that I could say about that, but we're just spending too much of our time on there, I think. Nice. And so yes, what the thing where you came on my radar in recent times was as a fellow commentator on the FarmKind saga, the Forget Veganuary campaign, the now infamous campaign. And you are, I think, one of the only other people, as far as I could tell, expressing some amount of sympathy towards the campaign, or at least understanding, and I can see what they're trying to do here. How did you approach that, and how's your thinking kind of changed about it? You'd had 2 really long blog posts on it, which we read with great interest. But yeah, just have at the FarmKind gate if you will. Nice.
Yeah, no, I did notice at that time that, and I'm still surprised how, and I think I like a message I would want folks in the more abolitionist wing of the movement, which I still have fully one leg in. I'm heading back to Wisconsin in a couple of weeks to get arrested for breaking some beagles out of a beagle farm. Like,
right, I want to ask you about
still
that.
But a message I really hope folks who more identify with that wing of things is how much the EA forum, lit up with unhappiness about the Forget Veganuary campaign, and how people really, were upset by the kind of, adversarial tone, or throwing another group under the bus, or kind of cannibalizing like some momentum that another group has made, worked very hard to build for like your own different goal. I came at it, there's so many layers, and I think, you and I probably see very eye to eye on this. just the top layers, it's like I do just wish people would try shit more. Like I want to see how we're not on track. Like
Right.
especially if you're on the abolitionist side of things, we are not on track to get what we want. We're on track, maybe if we took AI out of the equation and we looked at where we are right now and the direction things are going, like I think the most optimistic argument you could make if we kept our current direction, both as society and as a movement, is about 2100, there's going to be more factory farming everywhere in the world, but maybe a lot of it will be cage-free and gestation crate-free. Like the cage-free number is going up, the total number of factory farming is going up much faster. That's not good. We're not, and we're not seeing the signal. There's not really any counter signal that like, underneath all of that, there's this quiet but growing trend towards veganism or towards something transformational or alternative protein. Like you might have folks might have a different theory of change about whether alternative protein is good, would really kind of ripen before then. But so I just want people to try stuff, and I thought, hey, this is a really new, interesting angle, and specifically for a lot of folks who've even again within the grassroots radical side, there's been questions about veganism. I came in through direct action everywhere. We were always saying, this individual vegan approach is not going to take us where we need to go. And I think people have been saying this for more than 10 years. Lots of people in different corners of the movement. And to me, the farm kind thing is like almost the first people to really put their money where their mouth is and say, all right, we want to get non-vegans into the movement. Here we go. This is how we're going to do it. And I don't, whether or not it works, I love to see it tried.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's like rolling the dice, really. It's not, we're not on track, as you say. We do need to try something new. And it seems obvious to me that focusing on generating resources for the animal movement and for the most impactful organizations in the movement is a way better goal than direct vegan activism, for example, which I think is very important, and it's good that there's people doing that. But just you can think about it like multiplier effects, right? If you have people who are now generating funding for effective animal advocacy organizations, that is going to lead to more vegans on the second order kind of thing. And that's what I talk about mostly on the channel, as well as like doing effective donations, sharing things on social media, taking part in organized activism campaigns. So yeah, I think like it's like looking upstream at what's going to be the things that you can affect that are going to have like kind of multiplying effect on animal suffering or animal rights violations, however you think about it, further down the line. And I think that the effects of FarmKind in the end, they're reported quite modest donations, really, certainly like less than we might have hoped that they would raise. But also interestingly, Veganuary had a record year and a sort of expectation beating year in terms of their growth from previous years. I have a video about that where it's some number of thousand people more than our trajectory would have anticipated. So it's not clear whether the campaign, which was another thing discussed at the time, actually reduced participation in Veganuary. And I had this kind of table where it's you create this many donors and you lose that many vegans, and if you're up here, then you're doing more harm than good. If you're down here, you're doing more good than harm. But I think in the end, it's a lot more subtle, the effects on both sides. Like there wasn't a ton of money raised directly. There also doesn't seem to be damage to the number of vegans. Of course, very difficult to say. But there was all sorts of other factors going on as well, like the organizational level, as you mentioned, that, I think there were some things kind of handled regrettably there. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're harder on themselves than I would be, actually, the FarmKind team. Like, stuff happens, you try things, people, there's a tricky balance to strike with like movement, organizational kind of relationship norms here. Where at the end of the day, I don't think, we can't have a movement where like you need every stakeholder's permission to do a campaign. This is obviously an extreme case if you're literally going to like use someone else's brand. And, but I have, I've been in lots of situations where people have been asking me like not to do a certain campaign because it would affect something they're doing, and it's like I want to take that very seriously. I want to consider it, but it can't be. We can't all have a veto on everyone else's. I think that'd be a really bad place for us to wind up. Also, really quickly, like we didn't actually really get to find out because FarmCon did have to kind of kill the campaign halfway through because of the amount of infighting that it was generating. So they had some like national TV spots lined up, actually already recorded. You probably heard this, like that. And then once they dropped Veganuary from the site, then they didn't air those segments because the story was gone. So we don't know what would have happened if I think, and to some extent, it was like it was trending towards demonstrating the hypothesis that using this kind of explicit rejection of veganism was going to get them onto a national stage. Whether they would have gotten funds from that, we don't know, and we probably won't ever. And I'm a little bit sad about that.
Yeah, I hear that. I mean, it's so interesting. In those early days of January, you had the feeling of, I was thinking every day, like, God, imagine being one of the FarmCon people now. Like, really, you're getting cancelled in the truest way by like everyone whose opinion that you care about. And I think, yeah, you and I were some of the only people saying, hang on, let's wait and see. But I mean, the pressure to call it off was tremendous. And so I'd heard that they'd recorded a radio segment that didn't ultimately go out. I could be
misinformed.
Okay.
I thought I'd heard TV, but it's been a few months. So yeah,
they had a very brief thing on TV, but yeah, they were looking to get like bigger media coverage than they did, and that's where their theory of change was really driving, and it never quite got to that stage. Which, yeah, I agree is somewhat a shame, because who knows? It could be really transformational. This is the thing. Like, the movement does have a very modest amount of funding overall, and it is not out of the question that it could be like increasing by 50% or 100% overall funding if the campaign goes very well, right? But yeah, I guess we won't find that out yet.
I wonder what you think of, something I never kind of wrote about. I didn't think as much about. I guess I touched on this a little bit in one of my pieces, but like I suspect that one thing coloring, especially on the sort of grassroots activist side of space, like coloring the reaction, is just like a higher level thing about money and our relationship to money and what we think, in capitalism, and a bit like our anti-capitalist kind of tendencies. And money is this sort of icky thing, and the idea that you could like exchange the idea that there would be any conversion rate either for an individual between their donation and the animals that they directly kill, or on a movement level, on a strategy level, like that table you're describing, that you lose this many vegans, we get this much money. And that's something, I definitely, one of many things that I've seen my views shift pretty dramatically on over my 10 years in the movement. Like money, can do it can be whatever you want it to be. And it's this store of, energy.
Yes.
It's absolutely fungible. Whatever, like anything, and I tried to argue this, to some folks, like whatever the thing is you value, even if it's vegan outreach. Well, actually, if you raise money, you could pay people to go door to door and do vegan outreach, or you could pay to target the most likely people to go. If you do a FarmCon campaign targeting people who aren't going to go vegan but might give money, you can use that money to go get people who are going to go vegan to go vegan. It's like it's just, and it is like yeah.
100%. No, I hear what you're saying. There's like a suspicion when money becomes involved that that's somehow an inherently bad thing or destructive thing. And like say, like there's a lot of anti-capitalist sentiments and stuff like this, which frankly, I think, yeah, I mean, it's obvious to me that the more money the movement has, the more animals that we can help. It does translate it directly into, people being able to work in animal organizations and, being policy lobbying and everything costs money. Everything costs money in organization. Living ain't free. And to the extent that you're doing any activism, you have to be able to support yourself. But like it seems to me like an obviously good thing to have some amount of as a larger part of the movement as we can afford to, basically having professional roles and being able to spend all of their time and become experts and have contacts in policy and stuff like this. But yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying, that some people are suspicious of that per se. And that's actually, funnily enough, something that came up in my discussion with Roger Yates. We didn't quite go over the ground as thoroughly as we might have, but I think it's one of the criticisms that came up in the FarmKind campaign, or one criticism that you saw of Tony Vanelli, who had gone from working for Veganuary to work to FarmKind. Oh, she's just a mercenary. She used to be paid by this organization. Now she's paid by that organization. I'm thinking, like, she's working for two different animal charities. I doubt she's like rolling in money, frankly, right? It's not going to be... Frankly, everyone working in the movement, for the most part, people are leaving money on the table compared to if they were working in the private sector doing some other career, really. But yeah, some people will think if you're getting paid to do something that's bad, or that's like somehow corrupt. But yeah, you're right. It's an energy store and totally fungible, I think is, yeah.
As opposed to, I mean, like, Tony's probably a great example, right? Because I'm almost certain that it's more the case that, like, her perspective shifted, and so she chose to change her location in the movement and pursue what she now believes is effective after spending, years and years pursuing something. I mean, I don't want to say I certainly don't mean to put words in her mouth and say that she doesn't believe in veganuary anymore, but and I think you're right. It's like there is this unstated thing, like, oh, this person's just basically trying to get money in some way for themselves or something. And the seat that, like, where I was sitting when my perspective on this morphed was not like just as an employee, but as a person managing an organization. My pay was set. I wasn't trying to, I'm not fundraising to get a raise for myself. I'm fundraising because, like, if I get this much more money, I can do this campaign.
100%.
Or I can do that. Like, it is, it's just seeing that. And I'm like, well, if we don't raise this, we're going to have to kill that thing that we wanted to do that I really think had a good chance of helping animals. But, and the flip side, like, something I gained, like, at the same time, I gained so much reverence, actually, for, like, it was this almost, spiritual feeling of responsibility to be taking in donations, whether they were very large donations from, foundations, billionaires, whatever, or grassroots donations where we're asking people, to take an hour's worth of pay for the month and put it into, an activist organization. Just this huge responsibility to use that in the most effective way possible. And I think a lot of, like, when I first came in as just an activist in direct action everywhere, I had this idea of, like, oh, funders. Again, it's just this theme of money being corrupting. Funders shouldn't be making decisions about, what an organization focuses on, or, like, the locus of strategic decision making should be done by the people on the streets. And my perspective changed a lot. I came to the point, running for Animal Future, where I felt I want to go to funders. Like, they are in this very unique position in the movement that forces them to take this bird's eye view. In some ways, even more than, and they have access to information even more than I do, as, like, these days I'm a blogger or something, and I'm taking kind of a bird's eye view, but there's so much I don't see and don't know. Like, only the funders are seeing this stuff. And, so I go to them and say, hey, listen, like, it just felt like such a collaborative relationship where I wanted their money to be spent on the most effective way to help animals. And so my job, part of it, is to go to them and say, listen, we've done some research in the position we're in with the capacities and skills that we have. This is the most effective thing we can do. And, like, there you go. And if you think that, like, you tell me if that's, reaches the threshold that you're seeing, or if there's a better place that you can put those resources. And if there is, I don't want to be, like, given this big pile of resource that, like, this power that I'm not going to be able to use most effectively. That's, like, it becomes this burden.
100% agree with you. Yeah. And I had a similar perspective from running an organization and thinking, oh, okay, shit, like, it costs money to employ people. Oh, that sounds obvious to say it, right? But you don't really feel it until you do it. Like, oh, I've got to meet payroll at the end of the month, whatever it may be. Yeah, everything costs money. You like, and then you immediately get into thinking, okay, the movement has a limited amount of resources, and we absolutely have a responsibility to make sure that that's being spent well. And I totally resonate with what she said as well about, like, so I'm, we'll apply for grants or write RFPs for particular organizations that are looking for research to be done. Pardon me, got Alexa chirping up over here. I'll unplug that. And yeah, when we don't get them, on some level, I think that's great. Somebody else must have done a better application. Somebody else must have done a better RFP. Like, it's good that there are people who, I thought my project was a good idea. You should see the competition, right? So I totally agree with that. And I also think it's a good thing that there is some amount of centralization of that decision-making, kind of specialization with big funders who, of course, can decide where to put their money and decide, will like be, these are the kind of interventions or whatever that I want to support. Because, frankly, the people on the street, as it were, are not in a position to know actually what's the best use of the money, right? Obviously, we all want our own thing to be funded, but who knows if that's more effective than the next thing? And so it's good to have one example of this, I think, is with AI, which is something that you talk about a lot. The movement funders are quite enthusiastic about AI and recognize, right? Because in order to be a funder, you're almost by definition like a successful business person, right? You've got millions to give away now. You must have done something right in business. And so, of course, you're going to understand organizations can be a lot more efficient if they're using AI, and that's a good thing at moving us towards the goal that the organization's trying to achieve. But on the ground level, that might not be that obvious, and a lot of vegans are kind of suspicious of AI inherently, and think, we shouldn't use it because it's using too much energy and stuff like this, which I think is a good thing that we, like, funders can say, well, we're going to fund stuff with AI, and now everyone kind of has to look right. Like, it's a good thing if that is a norm set, and there's like a group who are able to set that norm and overlap pretty well with understanding how to have organizations be efficient, I guess.
Yeah, and I'll just, to the extent that you disagree with the things that you and I are agreeing on right now, to the extent anyone disagrees, you should support FarmKind even more. Because that's the thing that, causes, I wish more people in the movement understood how extremely dependent we are on a few people who have decided, like, hey, I was extremely successful in a business venture or in an investment, and I want to turn around and put that into saving animals from factory farms. It's a very few people have decided to do that. There's this, they can all fit in one room. Like, all the people who are funding, who, responsible for something like 85, 90% of the resources in the farmed animal movement can fit in the room. And like grassroots, small dollar fundraising, accounts for a very small share. A few organizations, I want to shout out New Roots Institute, has just done like an amazing job in the last couple of years scaling up their small dollar fundraising. What that means, they have more independence. They have more, they have more autonomy. They're able to push back more on things that funders want them to do if they ever do disagree. And so a group like FarmKind comes along and is actually, trying to decentralize power more in the animal movement. And because that, that's what money is. We all know.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. Yeah, I didn't really think about it like that. But yeah, if the more small scale funders there are, obviously the more funding there is, but also the less, concentrated that, because I definitely have thought before, like, damn, any one of these dozen rich guys who's funding most of the movement could change their mind tomorrow and go, I'm going to sack this off, I'm not going to be a vegetarian anymore or whatever. And then it's like, well, that was right, like a decent chunk of all of the resources that we had to do things. It's not a great position to be so reliant on a small number of people. Obviously great that they choose to do this, and if ever I get to speak to these people, I just have nothing but nice things to say to them. But I totally see as well, with lots of like anti-capitalist sensibilities, I sometimes worry about that kind of thing being expressed in a way which could drive away would-be funders. I think it's a great thing that we have some number of rich people who decide to fund the movement, and I think we should be grateful for them for doing that, basically.
Yep, I agree. And I think people who are involved in the movement in different ways, like, you shouldn't even necessarily assume that you, in fact, would do that if you found yourself in stewardship of that level of resources. And then, more importantly, it's just like, well, you're like, the people who think a certain way tend very much not to be the ones who find themselves, stewarding such large resources, and that is correlated. It's not a coincidence.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it takes real moral fiber to. You've got there, you've become the multimillionaire, your venture was successful when it might not have been, you took risks along the way and so on, and then say, I'm here, I've arrived, I'm going to, in some cases, give it all away.
Yeah, and I'm going to give it away on things that are like speculative, uncertain. Yeah. People are coming and telling me like, hey, this is the great thing. Every year you have 100 people telling me, we're going to do this. It's going to be so great. And then like 2 years later, it's like, I don't know. Nothing really came of that. Like most things fail. The things that don't fail, like underperform. Everything's underperforming in the movement. Like people, it's going badly, and if you're sitting in a funding chair, yeah, however many years you've been doing that, you've had a lot of experience of like your expectations plummeting, and it's not even like, oh, I have these hundreds of millions, like I want to go spend them like on myself, just gallivanting around the world and having whatever maximum luxurious life. Like there's some of these folks are past the point that they could possibly spend it on themselves, but it's still I had a moment in the last few months talking to a funder where I was like, I've done this thing, the same thing I was saying before about like really picture myself as that chicken in a battery farm. Let me really just like take the perspective of this person who's responsible for these resources, and they earned them himself, and wants to do good things with it. There's not a lot that looks great. Like it is really an act of faith to be funding a lot of different projects that are. We're all hoping that this is going to pull together into something valuable, but the record doesn't actually necessarily look that good for things other than honestly some of these really concrete incremental welfare reforms. So the people who are funding anything like that, it's really extraordinary. Like please be extremely grateful.
100%. Yeah, not only are they not spending it selfishly on themselves, but there's no guarantee of achieving like the things that they're actually trying to spend it on, however selfless that might be. It's also a risk in itself. Yeah. So I have not yet read your blog from the Open Rescue, but I definitely want to ask you about that. But I have read a lot of your stuff about AI, and we read the 10 possible AI futures, I think it was the end of animal advocacy.
One of my most rambling posts. I'm very impressed.
That was an awesome post, honestly. And my takeaway from it was like most of those scenarios that you described were on balance good for animals, but many of them that came via being quite bad for humans. Hey, so if all the people get wiped out, then there's not going to be any animal farming, which a lot of people would say on balance that's increasing more utility than it's decreasing, right?
I certainly agree in the short term. You probably saw this past week, there was a debate prompt on the EA forum. The motion was, if AGI goes well for humans, it will probably go well for animals. And the prompt was to write, forum posts either in favor or against the motion. And I think many people pointed out that there are many scenarios and maybe even overall effectively an inverse correlation because certainly in the short term, like in the short term, just the longer, good for humans right now, definitionally meat. Like people want to eat factory farm meat. So good for humans means bad for animals. Like in development, like people getting richer in the developing world means more factory farming. So, and it is to some extent, speculative that but maybe later on this is going to change, and maybe AI is going to get us to this technological level where we choose to eat cultivated meat instead, or we do but so far pretty much inversely correlated. Yeah,
damn, that's kind of true. And I think it is a big part of that is like how the animal movement reacts to AI and manages to use AI. And I will say, influenced in no small part by your blogging on the topic, Bryant Research has recently dropped thousands of pounds on co-work packages and Anthropic Claude, which I'm loving, and definitely seeing the potential of, I think maybe especially for organizations like mine where it's very much knowledge work, modeling, research based, and then also policy advocacy, the value of being able to essentially automate so much of that stuff. And I think there's an almost infinite amount, we have an almost infinite to-do list, really. So having now able to have more resources and get things done more proficiently, I think is incredibly important. So I think there's like the movement adopting AI and being able to do more as a result of that. And I think there's a bunch of other kind of less predictable effects of AI over different timescales as well. One thing that I like looking kind of in the nearer term, I guess, I got quite frustrated in a recent LinkedIn post that I had posted something about, I think it was about plant-based meat being healthier than meat, which is a favorite hobby horse of mine. And a lot of like pro-meat people of in various professions were coming onto the post and, you know, giving their arguments against that. And I realized after a little while that a lot of them were posting AI-generated comments. I think so. There's a memo gone out on the other side that says, "Come to this, meat industry-oriented ChatGPT bot that is going to give you all the comments to post." And I was very frustrated. I thought it was awful. First of all, that they're using AI this way. They're completely predictable, really. If you think about it for a moment, it seemed to be a bad thing from my perspective that here I was having thought about this and put together some argument, and I'm spending time replying to these comments, and like the person on the other side of the screen is literally just copy pasting and not giving it any thought at all. And I thought, well, this is a really bad thing, and it's going to, you know, it's a tool that's being used very destructively by the other side. But now I kind of think it's that level is probably at the level that it's at the moment, where people can, I think, get quite objective answers on questions that are frequently propagandized, like, for example, the health impacts of red meat. Like, you can go and talk to an LLM and hash it out and ask questions, and isn't it the case that it's really about processed foods, and because it's unprocessed, it's good? And the better the models, the more they are giving you, like, an actual reasoned response to that and kind of talking you through it. And now I kind of think maybe when that level of knowledge and understanding is democratized and so widely available, it really undercuts a lot of the propaganda and the kind of suggestion. It's about bioavailability and it's about nutrient density, you know, all the kind of the tricks on the other side. So I'm not really sure what to make of that now. I guess that's quite a short-term concern in the scheme of things. But yeah, it seems to me like that democratization of understanding is probably a good thing.
Yeah, you know, there's been a chart, at least, I don't know if it's a study going around on like my Substackosphere, so I've seen a bunch of times, about, you know, how social media is usually polarizing. Like, people wind up in these kind of echo chambers and tend to veer further into hearing only information that supports their perspective. And initially, AI is doing the opposite. So people who spend more time engaging with AI on questions come out less polarized and more kind of understanding of different perspectives on topics. I think partly that is because companies are deliberately training models to be multi-partial. That is something we know. Like, they are, if for no other reason than that they are trying to avoid controversy. They want the models to kind of hedge and refuse to take a strong position on most topics. I think Anthropic is the least like this, and Claude is willing to take strong positions on topics that the facts sort of clearly support one side or the other, or one position, one perspective on questions. On the point about are these specific concerns about red meat versus processed plant-based meat, parochial, or how are these going to look in the fullness of time? It's not. To the extent that models are helpful for truth seeking, Um, you know, truth is really good, but there are other things I care about. And if it were the case, like I of course I believe it is not the case, like that, yeah, plant-based meat is healthier than red meat. That is, I believe that. But what if it were the case that weren't true? Like if we happen to live in a universe where actually, or just something about our evolution that just made it that we were like, in that case, then AI would be a tool that would be convincing more people to eat more meat. And plant-based, versus red meat isn't one of those things, but there may be things, that we're not even thinking about yet. So it's just, my point is that it's very much not by default. Like nothing about this technology is going to, by default, I shouldn't, that's an overly broad statement. Many of the things we care about are not aided by default by the way the technology will go. And there's a role for us to play in trying to steer the development of the technology in a responsible, safe direction. And that's, there's a movement for that. And one of my most recent posts is about how I'd love to see animal advocates like really claim our seat at the table and earn our seat at the table by making a positive, useful contribution to that. There are probably some things that are over-determined. We don't know yet how it's going to go, but I'm guessing that, if anyone's around to look back on this in 50 years, it's going to look, there are certain things about how this goes that will look pretty inevitable.
Yeah, interesting. Well, it'll be easy to be wise with hindsight, I suppose, won't it? Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, right? That in this case, it is the case that the truth, or like the increased ability to align with the truth, is going to be cut also in favor of what we would want as animal advocates. There could be cases where that's not the case. There could be like some inconvenient truths from the animal advocate's perspective, right? My sense is that overall, as a function of budget to influence discourse and like put out frames for understanding nutrition and stuff like this, like to the extent that there is much more ability to do that from the meat industry than on our side, my sense is that the truth, increased truth alignment would tend to be beneficial. But yeah, there's definitely, it's not a given. I hear what you're saying.
I think that's right. I mean, I'll say, one vision of how this, I suspect this goes, we're in, this brief moment where the conventional model of social media is like holding on by a thread and it's going to crash down. Like when all of this, when, you're just like 99% of the comments on every social media platform are AI and everyone knows it. I mean, that literally might be true right now, but when it becomes the case that everyone understands that, like, why are you going to log on to LinkedIn and just argue with a bunch of bots? Like, what's the point? You're going to go to the system that you trust. You're not, you don't want to go, okay, let's go to LinkedIn and like have an argument with whatever AI model someone else decided I should talk to today. You're going to go, I'm going to go to my model that I trust. And maybe that's going to be, Claude from Anthropic, that I think is this really responsible organization that's making, putting out costly signals about responsibility. And that I believe is, really aligned with the balance of like truth and, mercy or compassion that I care about. Or maybe it's going to be an open source model that I know, I've even like fine tuned it to my values a little bit, or there's going to be something in your world, everyone's interactions with information in the world are going to be mediated by one or more agents, because there's going to be just so much there. It will be impossible to sort through the torrent of information that you're going to be faced with every day without outsourcing some of that sorting and some of that sense making to an AI system that's helping you. And the question, a very big question is, will people make good choices about what systems to trust? Will we be able to make good choices about what systems to trust? Will you and I, even very discerning people, have access to reliable information about, how a given system was created, so that we can choose to use like systems that align with our, to some extent align with our values, but yeah, probably more importantly, just are like trustworthy.
Yeah. No,
social media is gone, a few years from now. There's nothing like, I can't imagine there's going to be something remotely like LinkedIn.
Yeah. That's That seems like a loss. I don't know. Maybe it seems like a good thing that at the moment you can be using the internet and communicating largely with other people and part of the marketplace of ideas, right, and all this kind of stuff. It's that seems like something that it would be a shame to lose.
Yeah, I have wondered.
We've lost it. Who knows?
I think we all. I don't want to say we all. Many of us probably look back on like the early era of Facebook when social media was actually social, and it was like mostly people that you knew, and doing things meant for their friends rather than like content streams of kind of these more parasocial relationships of people putting out content and most people consuming. Many of us look back on that fondly. I mean, there's obviously the revealed preference. These companies, it wasn't some grand conspiracy. Like, people wanted better content, and so they gravitated towards outstanding content producers rather than paying as much attention to their friends, like mediocre photos from out of the club last night or whatever it may be. But so we maybe it'll be something back to like, well, why would I pay attention to a post from anyone that I don't personally know in real life, because they're probably just a bot. But like, oh, this person, I really know them. Like, I'm interested. Oh yeah, Chris made a post. Like, well, I know Chris, so I'm going to read what Chris has to say. I could see something that's one way I could see this surviving. Obviously, the other thing is like some kind of human, like some way of proving that you're human on the internet has been bandied around many times. For now, I don't. That seems unlikely to me, but.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, we've kind of gone towards more generic content from whatever page that you don't even necessarily follow, but the algorithm thinks that you'll like this particular post. But maybe once we've gotten on so much of this is unreliable and or AI, then maybe it goes back the other way. Yeah. Okay, nice. Well, tell me about the Beagles. This is your latest chapter, I guess. Kind of back to your direct action roots, I guess.
Yeah, it is. There's moments in this. I mean, overall right now, I'm just extremely excited and motivated and just like working, 10, 11-hour days and not having any moment where I'm anything other than just like super stoked. But I have moments of real confusion where I'm just like, how much am I just like, it's, so this Beagle moment is big open rescue, actually a modest size for like mass action open rescue that happened 2 weeks ago at a beagle farm in Wisconsin, where they raise beagles, breed beagles to be sent into vivisection labs. And there's this 8-year courtroom drama behind it, where an undercover investigation team initially went in and rescued a couple dogs and took some footage, and then there was a felony prosecution, and then they beat the prosecution and they turned it around and got this judge to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate the farm. So there's this whole saga behind it, and that's one reason I think that it's going up in the media. Obviously, the main reason it's blowing up more than past actions like this is that it's dogs instead of chickens. Point being, I spent many years, talked to the very beginning, in Direction Action Everywhere, using these kind of mass disruptive, civil disobedience tactics to try to spark a moment for our movement, throwing animal rights into the national media spotlight, making us like a really salient, public and political and social issue rather than just this kind of very niche thing we are right now. And it didn't work. Spent years doing that, kind of gave up, or kind of, thought, okay, that approach isn't working. What can we do instead? And Wayne, the founder of Direct Action Everywhere, and, good friend of mine from back in those years, just kept at it. And I often thought, man, he's just keeping at it. I don't know, he's not giving up. Like, Wayne, come on, it's not working. And then, look at me, I'm eating whatever, vegan pro. This action blew up like I have never seen anything in the movement blow up like this. Like, people, my housemate went in Colorado, many states away, went to get a haircut, and his barber was talking to him like, oh, did you see that Beagle thing on the
Oh, great.
Super viral. It is getting, and so within, I'm sorry, I'm so all over the place here, but the action was on a Sunday. It went well. We got 22 dogs out. 27 people got arrested. We were happy. And then over the next couple days, sort of cleaning up and getting ready to go home. And it was just the media kept building up, and that was not, we got some local press at first, but then it kept building up, and the videos kept going more about, like, the momentum was just building over a couple days. And then I heard, like, midway through that week, that within like the first 4 days, over 30,000 people, it's now like 36,000 people had signed up online to, like, hey, I want to be involved in this campaign.
Wow.
Which was that's just a staggering number for anything. I mean, that's not necessarily like a petition. We've had petitions go viral, raise like $100,000. We've had fundraisers go viral before as a movement, as a whole, all of us. But that number was like, what? And so we immediately started talking like, well, we have to go back. We have to get all these 36,000 people to just come back to the farm with us.
Had signed up to actually come and do the rescuing.
Let's say that they took the very first step towards saying they were interested in doing that. So we followed up immediately to those people. Or the goal we set right away was, I want to get 2,000 of those people. And so far we have 1,000 of them signed up, plus about 200. And the interesting thing, all 30, these are brand new people, never interacted with the animal movement before. Most of them are not vegan or vegetarian, which I love. And so we're tapping into this whole new, base, and we want to get these people in. We want to use this. Let's make this a mainstream. And, it's dogs. It's not farmed animals. It's testing. It's worth doing. Let's see what we can get out of this. So we've got about 1,000 of those new people actually have signed up to, and are in the channels to go to the action. And we're going to keep pushing it. We have 3 more weeks. It's going to be April 19th. So can we get to 2,000 of those people? I think we have a chance. And if we do that, then we'll see where we go next. But it's this old idea that just never really quite took off in our years of past trying. Okay, you do a big action, you get a lot of attention, and you use that to suck people in, so you can do a bigger action. And you just see how long can you keep that flywheel going, and how big can it go? We're gonna find out.
That's awesome. Wow. So it's really about inspiring a lot of people to be doing. To be inspired to be part of it. And I think obviously dogs are uniquely able to do that, right? It wouldn't have the same effect if it's farmed animals, but in this case everyone loves dogs, right? There's been a similar thing in the UK. I don't know if you're aware of MBR Acres, right? Yeah, it's a very, very similar case. And so you said you were going back to Wisconsin in order to get arrested for this. Are you concerned about, like, having legal consequences for this?
I've been arrested probably like a dozen times before.
Wow, okay.
Some of those, So I've been all over the place. I don't anticipate. I mean, honestly, if we come back with hundreds of people, so I'm expecting we're going to have more than 1,000 people at the action, and many hundreds of them have said they want to take felony level risk. We're talking about smashing doors down with sledgehammers to get into this dog facility, which is much more highly secured than a typical like factory farm, and take out dogs that are worth anywhere from $1,000 to $2,500 to this company. Allegedly, they claim that's what the value of the dogs is.
Interesting.
To be able to sell to research labs. So and hundreds of people saying they want to take felony level arrest risk to go do this. There's no way this little county in Wisconsin can pursue all of those charges. So I think we're going to break them.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome. Because there's been kind of mixed results in the UK trials for the Beagle stuff. I don't know if you've seen.
Yes. Yeah, I know. Just learned. Yeah, right. What it was 2 days ago that one of the juries came back guilty was definitely a blow.
Yeah, I think they end up 2 guilty and 2 not guilty of the 4 cases that have happened. So it really is split, and I suppose that is part of the theory of change as well. There was it might have been you posted about this actually. No, I saw this at the VARC Vegan Animal Rights Conference last weekend. The jury passed a note to the judge saying, could the judge please advise on how to handle this what is clearly an evolving moral issue where the laws might not be actually reflecting what any decent person would consider moral or something like this. So it really is pushing the bounds on what should be legal in this respect.
I mean, it's true that dogs haven't gotten huge attention, or like dogs get more attention than farmed animals, but there's an amazing case in Utah several years ago that Wayne Shung and another friend of ours, Paul Picklesheimer, were on trial for rescuing pigs from a huge factory farm in Utah in this very rural area. I mean, we're talking, it's like 70% Trump voting county, where this Smithfield is like the, super majority employer. And they got acquitted unanimously by a jury for sneaking into a farm and taking piglets. And we met some of those people, and they were transformed by the experience of sitting through the trial and learning about the conditions, hearing from the activists who, of course, took the stand to explain why they did what they did, and we're completely open about it. Right, it's the same way with the Beagle people.
Yeah.
So there's, it's not. Yeah, it is. There is. I mean, the trials can be transformational. And to your point, I'm not as familiar with the UK legal system, but in the US, a loss in the district court is actually an opportunity to appeal and get an appellate ruling that would actually set legal precedent. That's a long shot.
Okay.
We're trying to, like, the argument would be not just, jury, look at this, choose to do the right thing. We'd actually be trying to make a legal argument that animals count as someone under the law, which warrants the use of what's called the necessity defense, which says you can break a law to prevent a greater harm coming to someone.
Okay, yeah. Well, that was going to be my next question about that, like the precedent that it sets. So at some level that could, if it goes up to the next level in the appellate court, you said that could happen, in which case the precedent is set that you can just rescue animals, as your vlog is titled.
Yeah, there you go. The day may come.
Yeah.
The day will come.
That's awesome.
Or we'll all die from AI.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Well, fingers crossed, eh? Thank you so much, Aidan. We're just over the hour. I don't want to keep you too long this morning, but I really appreciate it. Sunday morning for Aidan. So I appreciate you waking up and being with us on a Sunday morning over there. And do you want to shout out any of your stuff? Obviously, you have the Sandcastles Substack. Is there anywhere else where people should follow you or find your stuff?
Subscribe to the Substack, but more importantly, sign up at savethedogs.io to come with us on April 19th. And there are non-arrest risky ways to get involved and be extremely helpful. So, just being there in person, and there's many, you choose the level of risk that you want to take. It's going to be legendary. Okay. You don't want to miss this. Come on. This is the moment. This is it.
Awesome. Savethedogs.io. Awesome.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. Yeah, it was a lovely way to spend a Sunday. I'd love to come back.
Thank you so much, Aidan. Really appreciate you. And keep on keeping on.
Okay.
All right. Take it easy. Thanks again.